The bell above the cafe door rang softly. It was the kind of chime that made you pause, not because it was loud, but because it carried memory in its tone. Carter, behind the counter, didn't look up immediately. He was used to the quiet rhythm of mornings, espresso steaming, croissants warming, sunlight stretching across polished wooden tables. But this time, the chime pulled his gaze. She stepped in, half breathless. Sophie. Her name would come later, but for now, she was just the woman in blush pink. Her top clung softly to her shape, a snug U-neckline catching a glint of morning light. Her jeans, lightly faded, hugged her curves as if tailored to her. And her eyes, restless, searching, scanned the cafe like she was late for something, or maybe running from something. She walked straight to a corner table, dropped her small purse, and slid into the chair as though she'd sat there many times before. But Carter knew. He'd never seen her here. She didn't order right away. Just stared out the window, the fogged-up glass casting a blurry world beyond it. Carter finally approached, wiping his hands on a towel. "Coffee?" he asked gently. She blinked, startled, then nodded. "Black, no sugar." Her voice was low. Clear. Tired. He returned a minute later, placing the cup in front of her without another word. As he walked back to the counter, Eleanor, one of the cafe's regulars, an 80-something woman with thin silver curls and sharp eyes, watched everything from her usual seat near the plant wall. "She looks like a storm holding itself together," she murmured. Carter said nothing. But he glanced back at the woman in blush pink. She hadn't touched the coffee. Her fingers tapped the table absently. Her lips trembled every few minutes. And when she thought no one was watching, her eyes closed like she was trying to make a wish without saying it out loud. The bell above the cafe door rang softly. It was the kind of chime that made you pause, not because it was loud, but because it carried memory in its tone. Carter, behind the counter, didn't look up immediately. He was used to the quiet rhythm of mornings, espresso steaming, croissants warming, sunlight stretching across polished wooden tables. But this time, the chime pulled his gaze. She stepped in, half breathless. Sophie. Her name would come later, but for now, she was just the woman in blush pink. Her top clung softly to her shape, a snug U-neckline catching a glint of morning light. Her jeans, lightly faded, hugged her curves as if tailored to her. And her eyes, restless, searching, scanned the cafe like she was late for something, or maybe running from something. She walked straight to a corner table, dropped her small purse, and slid into the chair as though she'd sat there many times before. But Carter knew. He'd never seen her here. She didn't order right away. Just stared out the window, the fogged-up glass casting a blurry world beyond it. Carter finally approached, wiping his hands on a towel. "Coffee?" he asked gently. She blinked, startled, then nodded. "Black, no sugar." Her voice was low. Clear. Tired. He returned a minute later, placing the cup in front of her without another word. As he walked back to the counter, Eleanor, one of the cafe's regulars, an 80-something woman with thin silver curls and sharp eyes, watched everything from her usual seat near the plant wall. "She looks like a storm holding itself together," she murmured. Carter said nothing. But he glanced back at the woman in blush pink. She hadn't touched the coffee. Her fingers tapped the table absently. Her lips trembled every few minutes. And when she thought no one was watching, her eyes closed like she was trying to make a wish without saying it out loud. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. A siren in the distance broke the stillness. But inside, the silence settled like an old coat over her shoulders. Then, just as suddenly, she stood. She fumbled into her purse, took out a few bills, placed them on the table, and left. No goodbye. No sip of coffee. Just the door chime again. Carter returned to the table to clear the untouched cup. And that's when he saw it. Her purse. Still resting on the chair. He called out through the glass, but she had already vanished into the mid-morning crowd. He picked it up carefully, unsure if he should open it. But something about the moment, it wasn't nosiness. It was instinct. He slowly unzipped the main pocket. And what he saw inside changed the quiet of that cafe forever. A folded letter. A photograph of a young girl. A locket. And a hospital wristband with today's date. He froze. Behind him, Eleanor sipped her tea. Well, she said quietly, sometimes the universe hides its cries in pink tops and abandoned purses. Carter didn't respond. But as he stared at that photo, he realized he'd seen that girl before. Only once. And in a place he hadn't returned to in nearly 6 years. The cafe's walls no longer felt warm. The jazz no longer gentle. Because suddenly, this wasn't just someone else's story. It was his too. And whatever came next, he had to find her. Carter sat in the back room, the purse resting like a question mark between his hands. The air smelled of cinnamon and old memories. His apron was still tied, his hands slightly damp from rinsing cups, but all of that felt far away now. He opened the purse again. Slowly. Like someone peeling away layers they weren't ready for. Inside, the photo stared up at him. A little girl with bright hazel eyes, missing front teeth, and a huge smile that could only belong to someone who hadn't yet learned heartbreak. He turned it over. In faded handwriting. Grace, age 5. First day at St. Alora's. That name. St. Alora's. It punched a hole through the years like lightning through old wood. He hadn't heard it since his own daughter had gone there. Before the accident. Before everything fell apart. His hand shook as he reached for the folded letter beside it. One edge was frayed. Like it had been opened and closed 100 times. He hesitated. Then unfolded it. To the person who finds this. I don't know where else to go. I've lost custody of Grace. The system said I wasn't stable. But no one knows how hard I've fought, how much I've changed. Today is her birthday. I just wanted to see her, even from afar. If you're reading this, please don't judge me. I'm not dangerous. I'm just a mother who ran out of time. Sophie. He sat back, stunned. Sophie. That was her name. The woman with the pink top and tired eyes, she wasn't just drifting. She was drowning. And now, she'd walked out into the city with nothing but the sound of her own guilt. Carter's breath slowed. His fingers touched the hospital wristband. The tag read, Visitor Pass, St. Elora Pediatric Wing. 9:30 a.m. He looked at the clock. 9:22 a.m. His chest tightened. She had somewhere to be. And if she wasn't there by 9:30. He grabbed his coat, shoved the purse into his bag, and ran out through the alley behind the cafe. Outside, the sky had turned grey, clouds stretching low and tight across the skyline. Eleanor, now sipping her second tea, watched him leave. She didn't ask. She simply whispered under her breath. Some doors open. Others are meant to be chased. Carter turned the corner and disappeared into the morning rush. He didn't have her last name. He didn't have her phone number. All he had was hope. And a child's photograph. Somehow, it felt like enough. Carter's shoes pounded the pavement, his breath sharp in the cool morning air. Every step echoed louder than the last, pushing him forward, faster, heart pounding not just from the rush, but from something deeper. He had no clear destination, yet every fiber of him knew exactly where he needed to be. The image of the little girl from the photograph kept flashing in his mind. Grace. 5 years old. Hazel eyes. A smile too bright for the shadow Sophie was walking in. He turned the final corner. There it was, St. Elora Pediatric Hospital. Tall glass windows reflecting the cloudy sky, people in scrubs and coats drifting in and out, heads buried in their routines. Carter slowed down only when he reached the wide stone steps. The entrance loomed ahead. Automatic doors. A blue sign above it read, Pediatric Visitor Check-in. He scanned the sidewalk, desperate. Then, suddenly, just beyond the tall planter filled with overgrown lilies, he saw her. Sophie. She was seated on the edge of a concrete bench, her knees pulled tight to her chest, arms wrapped around them. Her long hair was tied back in a messy knot. She wore a loose hoodie now, but beneath it, Carter could see the edges of the same pale pink tank top she had worn at the cafe. Her eyes were fixed on the sliding doors. Unblinking. Like she was watching a dream she wasn't allowed to enter. And beside her? A small wrap package. Lumpy. Soft. It looked like a child's stuffed animal inside. Carter paused. He could feel the lump rising in his throat. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like someone trying not to fall apart in public. He approached slowly. No sudden movements. Just steady, kind footsteps. She noticed him. Her head turned slightly. Eyes narrowing in quiet recognition. "Hi," Carter said gently, slowing to a stop. Sophie blinked. For a second, she didn't say anything. Her gaze darted to his hands, then his face, then back to the hospital doors. "You, from the cafe," she whispered. "Did I leave something?" Carter nodded. Then carefully pulled the purse from his coat. "I didn't mean to read the letter," he said, his voice trembling. "But I did. And I'm glad I did." Sophie looked away. Carter sat down beside her. Close enough to offer warmth. Far enough not to invade. She didn't move. "I know I'm a stranger," he said, "but I think maybe I was meant to find that letter." Silence. Then she whispered, "I only came to see her from the sidewalk. Not to go in. They said I'm not allowed." Carter looked at her. Her shoulders trembled just slightly. The kind of shake that came from holding in too much for too long. "Today's her birthday, right?" he asked. She nodded, eyes fixed on the sliding doors again. "She loves pandas," she said softly. "So I got her a stuffed one. It's not much. But I wanted to give it to someone who could pass it on to her." She motioned to the wrapped gift at her feet. Carter's eyes stung. He reached into the purse again and pulled out the photograph. "This picture," he said, holding it carefully, "reminds me of my own daughter. She would have been about this age now." Sophie turned to him, surprised. "You lost her?" Carter nodded slowly. "Car accident. 3 years ago. I still remember her laugh like it's happening next to me." For the first time, Sophie's defenses lowered. Her face softened. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I didn't know." "I know," he replied. "You couldn't have. But I know what it's like to carry a loss like that. And I know what it means when the world tells you you're not enough." A pause. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. A little girl walked out, holding a nurse's hand, skipping slightly. Sophie froze. It wasn't Grace, but for a moment, Carter thought she might bolt to her feet. Instead, she whispered, "Maybe I should go." But Carter reached out gently, hand open, not touching. "What if you stayed just 5 more minutes?" Sophie looked at him. 5 minutes, she repeated. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The two sat in silence, watching the entrance. And for the first time that day, Sophie didn't feel alone. The morning was growing colder. A thin drizzle began to dust the sidewalk, but Carter and Sophie didn't move. The quiet between them wasn't awkward anymore. It had settled into something soft, like an old blanket that knew exactly how to hold grief. Sophie looked down at her hands. She was twisting her fingers together without realizing it, her nails chewed short. The panda plush sat in her lap now, still wrapped but damp from the air. She hadn't let go of it since Carter arrived. "Do you ever stop wondering what they're doing?" she asked suddenly. "Like right now. In that room. Is she laughing? Is she sick today? Did she cry for me?" Carter's eyes followed hers toward the windows above. Somewhere behind one of those was Grace, tiny, fragile, carrying a piece of Sophie that no one else could see. "Every day," he answered softly. "Even now. Some part of me wonders if Lily would have loved music. Or if she'd have outgrown dolls by now. My mind still builds the life she should be living." Sophie swallowed hard. "I used to sing to her at night," she said, eyes welling. "Back then, when I still had her. She'd always grab my hair in her little fists and hum with me. Not real words, just sound. Like she was adding her own melody." Carter smiled gently. "What did you sing?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Moon River." He looked at her, his expression softening with memory. "My mother used to hum that when I couldn't sleep." Sophie chuckled under her breath. Small world. They sat in silence again, but this time, the stillness carried weight, a kind of shared knowing that few people are lucky enough to find. Or perhaps unlucky enough to earn. A security guard stepped out of the hospital doors and gave them both a brief, neutral glance. Sophie tensed. Carter noticed. "You're not trespassing, you know. You're just visiting from a distance." "I'm on a list," she murmured. "Not the good kind." Carter frowned. "I read the court letter. Sophie, whatever happened, it doesn't change the fact that you're still her mother." Sophie's eyes flicked toward him, guarded again. "You think I deserve to see her?" "I think you already love her more than most people are capable of," he said. "And I think this world does a terrible job of giving second chances to people who actually want them." Tears welled in her eyes, then spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I used to think I had time," she said, her voice cracking. "Time to fix myself. Time to get back to her. But now, every birthday that passes, it feels like she's drifting further away. Like one day she won't even remember me." Carter leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'll tell you a secret," he said quietly. "Lily had a favorite stuffed bunny. Its ear was half torn off and its name was Pancake. I kept it after the crash. It still smells like her room. And every once in a while, when the night gets really quiet, I hold it like she's still there. And I swear I hear her laugh. Just faintly. But it's real. To me, it's real." Sophie covered her mouth as the sob finally escaped. "I want to be a mother again," she whispered. "Not just in memory. I want to earn it back." Carter turned to face her fully. "Then start now. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. Sophie looked down at the panda in her lap. Suddenly, without thinking, she stood up. "What are you doing?" Carter asked. She hesitated only for a second. "I want to give this to someone. A nurse. A janitor. Anyone who can take it to her." Carter stood beside her. "Let's do it together." Sophie hesitated at the entrance. The hospital doors hissed shut behind them, cutting off the cold drizzle outside. Now the hallway buzzed with the hum of medical machinery, soft announcements over the intercom, and the rhythmic squeak of nurse shoes on polished tiles. It wasn't noisy, but it was alive, in a way that made Sophie feel both invisible and vulnerable. She clutched the panda toy tighter to her chest, its soft fur damp against her fingers. Carter was already a few steps ahead, his posture composed, his steps confident, like a man who had long ago learned how to hide the shiver behind a mask of stillness. But he stopped when he noticed she wasn't beside him. "Hey," he said gently, turning back. "You okay?" Sophie nodded, but didn't move. Her feet felt like they were rooted in place. "I've seen this hallway before, in my dreams," she whispered. "Always the same flickering light above the reception. Always the smell of sanitizer and crayons. And I always wake up before I get to the door." Carter stepped closer. "Well, you're awake now. And you've already made it further than your dreams ever did." Sophie let out a shaky laugh. "That sounds like a line from a movie." "Maybe," he smiled. "But it's still true." He extended his hand, not demanding, just offering. She stared at it for a moment, then placed her trembling fingers in his. Together, they walked toward the pediatric desk. A young nurse with a tired face and a messy bun glanced up from behind the computer. "Can I help you?" Sophie's voice caught in her throat. For a moment, she couldn't speak. She looked at the wrapped panda in her hands, then at Carter. He spoke for her. "We were hoping someone could give this to Grace Bennett. She's in room 204B. It's from her mother." The nurse's eyes flicked between them, suspicion flickering first, then softening as she took in the genuine expression on Sophie's face. The pain wasn't performative. It was raw. Unpolished. Honest. "She's not on the visitor list," the nurse said, her voice neutral but not unkind. "I know," Sophie said quickly. I wanted her to have something. Something soft. Something that smells like me." The nurse looked at the panda, then back at Sophie. "I'll make sure she gets it," she said quietly. Sophie let go of the toy like it was a part of her. Her arms dropped to her sides, suddenly empty. Hollow. But also lighter. "Thank you," she whispered. As they turned to leave, Carter noticed the subtle change in her expression. Her eyes were still wet, but the corners of her lips weren't trembling anymore. Her back wasn't curled in defeat, it was upright. Poised. Like something inside her had straightened with that one simple gesture. When they reached the exit doors, Sophie stopped again. "Do you think she'll know it's from me?" she asked, not looking at him. Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to look back toward the pediatric wing. "You know, when Lily was sick, I used to bring her toys with notes. I'd write, 'From someone who loves you like the moon loves the tide.' She didn't know it was me, not at first. But eventually, she told me the notes felt like sunshine inside her chest. Like someone out there was rooting for her." He looked at Sophie. "She'll know. Maybe not today. But one day, she'll hold that panda close and feel you there." Sophie blinked away fresh tears and nodded. She always used to squeeze her plushes against her cheek when she was sleepy. Like they were made of magic. Carter chuckled. They probably were. To her. They stepped outside. The rain had stopped. The sidewalk still glistened, but the clouds had parted just enough to let a muted golden light spill across the hospital's facade. Sophie pulled her jacket tight around her shoulders. I don't know what happens next. You don't have to, Carter said. You just have to keep showing up. She glanced sideways at him. You always this calm with strangers. You stopped being a stranger back at the train station, he replied. There was a beat of silence between them, heavy, but warm. Then Sophie turned to face him, really face him, for the first time since they'd met. Thank you, Carter. For everything. For not judging me. He nodded. We all need someone to believe we can be more than our past. She smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. The diner was nearly empty, save for a few late-night souls nursing lukewarm coffee and quiet thoughts. The booths were worn but clean, the vinyl seats patched with age. A single waitress moved behind the counter with practiced slowness, humming along to a forgotten jazz tune crackling through the jukebox in the corner. Sophie sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of chamomile tea. Her eyes watched the rain roll softly down the glass, tracing its path like it was telling her a story she once knew by heart. Carter sat across from her, stirring a cup of black coffee. He hadn't taken a sip yet. He just stirred it, like it gave him something to do with his hands while he figured out what to say next. Tea's helping, he asked quietly. Sophie nodded. It's warm. That's enough right now. Silence followed, not the awkward kind, but the kind that settles in after something heavy has passed through. The kind that feels sacred, not empty. I didn't think today would turn out like this, she finally said, setting the cup down. I thought I'd get off that train, find a job maybe, and just disappear. Like a shadow. You still could, Carter replied, his voice low. But you didn't. Sophie let out a small, bitter laugh. I don't even know why I got off at that station. It wasn't my stop. Carter raised an eyebrow. Maybe it was. She looked at him then, really looked at him. His face was calm, but there were creases near his eyes that hinted at sleepless nights, and the edge of his jaw tensed whenever she mentioned her daughter. He wasn't just some stranger who'd shown up at the right time. He understood something. Maybe too well. You lost someone too, she said softly. He didn't flinch. Just nodded once. My daughter. Lily. 3 years ago. He paused. Cancer. The rare kind. The kind that steals not just the child, but every ounce of light from a room. Sophie's hand moved instinctively across the table, then stopped midway. But Carter reached over and closed the gap, placing his hand gently over hers. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I, he said. But I'm not telling you to make you feel better. I'm telling you because I know what it's like to hold grief like a burning coal and not know where to put it. To carry love with nowhere to send it. Sophie looked down at their joined hands. Her voice was barely audible when she spoke again. I gave her up, because I thought it was the only way to protect her. I wasn't ready. I was a mess. I still am. But that choice, giving her away, it tore something out of me. Carter squeezed her hand gently. You made a sacrifice most people don't understand. Loving someone enough to let go? That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of love. The jukebox shifted to a softer track, something with a piano and distant vocals. The rain continued its soft tap dance against the glass. Sophie pulled her hand back slowly, cradling her tea again. I watched her through the hospital window. Just for a second. She was drawing with purple crayons. That was her favorite color when she was a baby. I remembered that. Isn't that crazy? It's not crazy, Carter said. It's memory. It's the kind of detail only a mother would hold on to, even after years of silence. She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. I feel like I met two people today, she said, looking up at him again. Grace, and you. Sometimes, Carter replied, the people we're meant to meet don't come in the order we expect. But they come exactly when we need them. The waitress passed by and placed the check quietly on the table, not saying a word. The two of them didn't move to pay just yet. Outside, the clouds had begun to part. A faint moon hung low in the sky, reflected in the puddles that lined the empty street. I don't know what happens next, Sophie said, echoing her words from earlier. You don't have to, Carter repeated softly. But if you want, I can walk with you a little longer. A tear slid down Sophie's cheek, not from sadness this time, but from release. The kind of emotion that comes when the dam finally breaks and the flood doesn't destroy you, it cleanses you. I'd like that, she said. And for the first time since the day began, Sophie smiled fully, not just with her lips, but with her whole being. It wasn't joy. It wasn't closure. But it was something close to peace. The streetlights flickered as if unsure whether to stay on or give into the soft glow of the coming dawn. Water shimmered across the sidewalks and roads, reflecting the orange and pink hues rising slowly on the horizon. The storm had passed, but everything felt changed, washed clean, somehow quieter. Sophie and Carter walked slowly, neither in a rush. Her coat hung loosely over her frame, and her damp hair stuck to the sides of her cheeks. Carter walked beside her, hands in his pockets, as if guarding her from the world just by being there. For a long time, they said nothing. There was a peace in the silence now, not the kind that comes from exhaustion, but the kind that follows understanding. Finally, Sophie broke it. I thought today was going to break me, she said softly. I really thought I wouldn't survive walking past her. Seeing her. Seeing the life I gave away. Carter looked ahead, his voice steady but gentle. You didn't just survive. You gave yourself permission to feel. To see her, even if from a distance. And you stayed. That takes strength most people can't imagine. She smiled faintly, but it faded as quickly as it came. I wonder if she felt something, she said. When I stood outside that window. If her heart recognized me somehow, even if her mind didn't. Carter stopped walking. Sophie turned to face him. She probably didn't recognize you, he said honestly, but she felt something. Children know. They may not have the words for it, but they feel the gravity of love when it passes near them. Especially a mother's love. Sophie looked away, blinking quickly. I just wish I could have said something, anything. You said everything, he replied. In the way you looked at her. In the way your hands trembled. In the way you couldn't stop watching her, even when it hurt. A long breath escaped Sophie's chest, somewhere between a sigh and a quiet sob. She's growing up without me. And she's happy. That should make me feel better, but it makes me feel invisible. Carter stepped closer. You're not invisible, Sophie. You're her origin. Her foundation. You're the reason she can be that happy. You gave her the chance to live free of your struggle. Her eyes locked with his, shimmering with emotion. Do you think she'll ever want to meet me? He didn't answer right away. Then. I think one day, when the time is right, she'll have questions. And when she does, I hope you'll be ready with answers, not just about who you were, but who you are now. Sophie nodded slowly. The idea scared her, but it also gave her something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope. They reached the corner of the block. A crosswalk lay ahead, the red hand glowing in the stillness. A few birds chirped in the trees nearby. The world was beginning again. Carter glanced down the side street. "My car's parked that way," he said quietly. "Oh." Sophie's voice was barely above a whisper. He turned to her. "But I'll wait with you here if you'd rather not be alone." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Her fingers trembled as she handed it to him. "What's this?" "My address. I don't know if you'll ever need it. But if Grace ever wants to meet me, or if you just want to write, I'd like to be found." Carter took the paper gently, folding it again with reverence. "I'll keep it safe." The crosswalk turned green. They didn't move. Sophie looked up at him, her eyes steady now. "I'm going to walk a little farther. There's a park down that way. I need a few more minutes with this day before I let it go." Carter nodded. "I'll be nearby." She took a step back, then paused. "Thank you, Carter. For more than I can put into words." He smiled. A deep, knowing kind of smile. Some people, we meet for a reason. Some just need someone to believe in them again. I think you gave me that too. Sophie turned, and with slow, careful steps, began walking toward the park. Carter watched her go. He didn't follow. He didn't interrupt. He simply stood there, under the awakening sky, holding a small folded piece of paper and a moment he'd never forget. The city breathed in again. A breeze swept down the street, and in it, the scent of morning, of coffee, of rain-soaked soil, and something else. The feeling that this, right now, was a beginning disguised as an ending.